Good evening. Welcome to the first presentation of 2025 for the Photo Society. It seems like I haven't seen you all year, so it's good to see everybody coming out tonight on this nice January evening in Northern Ohio. Just a couple of things to share. We've got a photo walk coming up Saturday at the Ledges, and that is 8 a.m. There. Dave Longfellow will be leading that one. And we've got some other stuff from the programming committee coming that we'll share with you in the newsletter in the future. And the other main thing I wanted to share is that we're going to be meeting now at the Hines Hill Conference Center rather than Happy Days for our presentations. A little more intimate space, and it's also easier for us to get reservations there. So that's about all I've got to say. I thank the programming committee for doing its thing of putting together programs. And I'm going to turn it over to Jean, who's going to introduce our speaker tonight. So welcome.
Thanks, Bruce. Everyone has a mobile phone camera today, but not everyone knows how to take advantage of its full power and potential. Tonight, we are pleased to have professional photographer Rad Drew show us how to get the most from our mobile phone cameras and help us capture quality that is higher than an ordinary snapshot. Rad is a photography educator and tour leader who creates with the iPhone, mirrorless, and infrared cameras. His creative images have been recognized internationally and exhibited in galleries around the world, including the Soho Gallery and Soho Art House in New York City, the LA Mobile Arts Festival, and the Obscura Gallery in Melbourne, Australia. Rad is an associate editor for photopxl.com and the Mobile Art Network, the App Whisperer. He's a contributor to the Art of iPhone Photography, serves as a representative for Topaz Labs, Fly Paper Textures, DxO, and Luminar, and is the creator of the popular webinar series, How I Did It. Thank you, Rad, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us this evening. So it's all yours now.
Well, thank you, Jean. I appreciate the invitation to be here. You know, I was trying to think if I had presented to you all before, but I don't think I have. So I'm really delighted to be here tonight. I photograph with a variety of cameras. I love my Fujis, and I have a Lumix DMC LX7 that I have converted to infrared. But I've been using an iPhone since 2009. The first one I got was an iPhone 4, and I fell in love with it. And what I've watched happen over the years, it's gotten more sophisticated every year. I used to joke that, it's kind of the Rodney Dangerfield of cameras. It didn't get any respect, but it's now at the point where a lot of serious big camera photographers are paying very close attention to what it can do. So what I want to share with you tonight is some of that. I'm going to keep my presentation to an hour. I've got a bunch of slides here, but I'm going to kind of go through those quickly and skip over some of them. You're going to have this slide deck. I'm going to make sure that I send this to Jean, and throughout the deck, there are some hot links to other resources. So for example, this first slide, if you want to reach me in any way, these are all my contact links, and you can click on these when you have the slides and go right to email me or to my website or whatever. I hope you'll subscribe to my newsletter and check out some of my workshops that I have coming up. I travel all over, and I've got some great things coming up in 2025. Excuse me. For those of you who don't know me, again, I'm going to be brief here. You can look at this later, but I've been involved in photography since the 70s. I went to school at Indiana University and got a degree in journalism with an emphasis in photography. And I studied with some great people. And I worked as a journalist for a period of time. And then I went back and got some more education, and I left, jumped ship from photography entirely. And I worked for 30 years at Eli Lilly and Company here in Indianapolis. But I never set my camera down. It wasn't part of my job anymore, but I was out with my own camera throughout that period of time. And then in 2010, I left Lilly and I started this business, and I have not looked back. It's been a great run for the last 15 years. I've been traveling the world, leading groups of people, sharing what I know about photography. I'm heading to Cuba in a couple weeks and Tuscany later in the spring, and then to the southern Italy in the fall and Cape Cod. It's just been a wonderful to be able to go to these places and enjoy photography with other people and share the things I know. Um, what we're going to talk about today are the things about the phone. Many of these, we all have one and we all take pictures with it, but there are things there that, I mean, I've had to really look hard to understand what all this camera can do. And I think you may be surprised, even if you've been using it for a while, some of the things I share with you tonight. We'll be looking at the features of the native camera in the phone, which didn't used to be worth a hill of beans. I mean, nobody used it. Everybody got a third-party app to take pictures and didn't use it. But now it's quite good, and it has features that let us get long exposures, do wonderful portraits, take bursts of photos. It gets wonderful night photos. But all these things require kind of knowing what to do. And so hopefully I'm going to share those things with you tonight. I also want to just quickly introduce you to something that I've been doing for the past, since the iPhone 11, however many years that is, 5 years. I've been making infrared photos with my iPhone. Infrared's a love I've had since film days, and I shoot digital infrared with my big cameras, but I've been doing with the iPhone, and I think you'll be amazed at the images that I share with you. It's really fun. I've been doing it for a while. We've got a website. If you're interested, you can check that out, and there are a couple of other links in here that you can look at. I do want to say too that it's not about the camera. Bruce was saying he's got a 14. So many of these cameras, they're so good, and even whether it's whichever camera it is, the flagship phones are all wonderful. If you don't have the latest and greatest, don't feel like you're missing out on a lot. I mean, there are features that we all love and the shiny bits and all that, but the phone that you have will do a lot. And so keep that in mind. The new gadgets and the new stuff are not going to make your pictures better. There's a whole lot of other things that go into that, as you well know. For me, with the phone, when I first got it, it just freed me from so many things. Not just the obvious. I didn't have to carry a big bag of gear around if I didn't want to. I had my camera in my pocket. I could process in the palm of my hand, and I could share things immediately. And that was very liberating. The other thing that it freed me from, and don't get me wrong, I love my big cameras. I shoot manual. I understand the exposure triangle, and I use it to my advantage. But when you're photographing with the iPhone, you don't need to pay attention to those things nearly as much. If you want to, you can find tools and apps that will let you take control of those things. But for the most part, the phone does so many things so well using computational photography and things that we might use our mind to do with our big camera. You can kind of relax a little bit and not worry so much about all of those things, because the phone will do a very good job for you. The thing that blows my mind about this too, I did a workshop last year. It was an all iPhone workshop. And on the last day, everybody was out on the beach in Cape Cod. And we had one woman was taking macro shots of these flowers growing on the beach. And someone else was doing an infrared photograph. And someone else was doing panos. Someone else was stopping people with their pets as they walked on the beach and doing portraits. And what I realized as I looked around, everyone was using the same kind of camera. And, I thought about that for a minute. If you were going to do all those kinds of photography with a big camera, you would need a bag of gear. You would need a neutral density filter for those long exposures. You would need a tripod. So many things that you could do with this one camera without having a lot of equipment. And it really opened my eyes. The other thing is you've got 6 different focal lengths that you can choose with the 16 and the 15. It's not as many with the 14 and lower, but imagine being able to press a button and get a 13 millimeter ultra wide 48 megapixel photograph. Well, the 16 will let me do that. When this was the 15 Pro Max, these pictures were taken with. I went out the first day I got it. This was last year. And I went around and I took a 13 millimeter, a 24, a 28, a 35, a 48, and a 120 millimeter photo. Now, so the 13 and the 24 are 48 megapixel files. The others start using computational photography to do some wizardry with the computer in order to get those focal lengths, but the quality is still quite amazing. So to have that kind of versatility with one device, it's pretty amazing. Let's just take a quick look at some examples. I'm going to blow through these pretty fast. You can spend more time looking if you want later. It's great for landscapes and panoramas. This is a landscape I wanted to show you. This was out in Cape Cod last year with the, I think this was the 16, and it's a 13 millimeter, 48 megapixel file in the ultra wide expanse. And I just love that you can get so much in the frame and be able to, tell that story in such a, with that ultra wide. This photo was here in Indiana. This was made with the 12 Pro Max with the ultra wide camera. And again, it's just allows you so much in the frame. You can really tell your story effectively. And again, just by the push of a button and you're in that lens. This was out on Cape Cod with that 16 Pro Max, really working up those colors, processing in either Lightroom Mobile or Snapseed to get these results. This was out on in Tuscany last spring with the 15 Pro Max. And I mean, I don't know if this comes through the zoom. This is a pristine photo. It's a 48 megapixel photo with the iPhone 15. I love doing panoramas with the phone. The one on the top, these are both Tuscany. The one on the top was last spring with the 15. The one on the bottom, I've done some stylizing and texturizing and things. That was done with the, I believe, the 10S. So even if you have an earlier phone, there's still a lot you can play with and have fun with. This is another pano that I did in Calabria, the southern Italy, down in the toe of the boot in a little community called a medieval village called Badalato. I'm heading back there next September, and I just had 2 cancellations. If anybody wants to join us on that trip, it's wonderful. This is at Tropeo in southern Italy, also right across from Sicily. Again, this was with the, I believe, a 10S Max. These print really large with integrity. They're very big files, and they look absolutely beautiful. Another pano from the Alicia Alonso Grand Ballroom in Havana, where the Cuban National Ballet performs. The other thing with panos, those are all horizontal panos that we looked at. These are vertical panos. You can take your camera and do a vertical pano and get these beautiful photographs. It's great for interiors of churches, narrow streets in Europe, all kinds of things like that. Really a fun thing to do. Portraits. So the 7 Pro, the 7 Plus was the first camera to come out with portrait mode. It allows us to create a depth map that lets us get this focus on our subject and this beautiful bokeh behind. And that depth map can be, once the photo's made, you can manipulate the depth map in editing afterwards. And again, each camera has gotten more sophisticated with that feature. There's a couple more that I've done here. You can decide how much of that blur you want. This was with the 10S Max, a Cuban farmer making charcoal. And I love that I was able to focus on his incredible eyes and face, but still keep some of that background for context. This was also the 10S Max using the portrait mode, one of the light modes that you can choose after you've made the photo. It's called stage light, I believe, and it drops the background out, separating the subject from the background in a beautiful way. This was just focusing on the iris in the foreground, but leaving enough of the background for context. There's a row of cypress trees in the background. Really just a fun way to do this. Another portrait mode photo with the 15 Pro Max last year in the fall. To me, this is the epitome of what this phone can do. I hope this comes through in the zoom. This is a pristine photo, and it's done with the portrait mode. So I've got crisp, clear, sharp, everything on that front plane, and then this depth because of the blur. It almost gives it a 3-dimensional look, and that's with the 15 Pro. Portrait mode obviously is also great for portraits. You can focus on that face, let that background blur to the extent you want. And then you can play with those color options, or I'm sorry, lighting options. And this is all the same photo, just processed a little differently in editing. Again, another portrait mode photo in a church in Italy. I focused on the votive candles in the foreground and just blurred the background slightly, just to leave the context there so you see that beautiful altar, but those candles in the foreground are sharp and pull you right into the image. The thing that is magic about this to me also is that you can make these changes after you make the photo, and we'll look at that in a minute. These portraits were made, my wife lets me play with her Barbie dolls sometimes, and I made these photos. This is all the same photo, but in editing, I tapped on the face of this doll, and because that depth map data is there, she's in focus. Then I tapped on the center doll, now she's in focus. Then I tapped on the third doll and she's in focus, because that depth map data lets you make those choices after the photo's made. Macro, these were done with the 16 Pro Max, a sunflower that I bought at the market this fall, a poppy in Tuscany. You can get within 2 centimeters of your subject, and macro kicks in when you get 10 centimeters from your subject. It will activate, and then you can get as close as 2 centimeters. And the detail is remarkable. Sorry about that. There we go. These were made with the 13 Pro. It was the first time that macro control came out was with the 13. And I made this photo here of this tulip. I did it in high sun, high contrast, not the usual time to photograph flowers, but I love that I could get so close and get such detail in the interior of that. This was done with the 15 Pro Max. This is just a jar of pencils I have on my desk here. And I would be happy if I made that with any of my cameras. And to do it with the phone is just really satisfying to me. You can also do live mode photos, which are really essentially a long exposure effect. So you can do this handheld without a tripod, without a neutral density filter. This is on the coast of Calabria in southern Italy. Everything in the image that's moving, that water hitting the shoreline, is soft, but everything that's not moving is sharp. Same here with a spillway in, I forget where this was, in Carolina somewhere. Everything moving is soft and shows that motion, and everything that's not moving is sharp. This shot I did in eastern Washington State, the region called the Palouse. This is Palouse Falls. And I had to climb up a pretty steep path to get up to the top, and I didn't have to carry my big bag and my gear. I carried my iPhone. I used live mode, and I made this photo. Couple more here. I'm going to skip through a lot of these. You can look at them later. The other thing that this camera will let us do is low light photos. So this photograph was made with the 12 Pro Max. That's the Alicia Alonso Grand Ballroom from outside. We were inside before. This is the exterior. What's interesting about the way this works, again, this is where that computational photography that the iPhone does so well comes in. When we do a night shot with our big camera, we put it on a tripod, we open the aperture to however, and then we leave it open, the shutter open for a period of time. And the sensor absorbs light for whether that 5 or that 10 or whatever seconds. Well, with the iPhone, it's very different. It's not the same kind of long exposure. It's actually a long period of time when the camera fires and makes lots of photos. So what's happening when night mode activates and you make sure that it's on and you take a night shot like this, you can hand hold it up to 10 seconds. And for those 10 seconds, it makes dozens of photos. Using computational photography, it stacks them all together. Well, there's noise on each one of those photographs, but the noise is random. It's in a different place on every photo. So when they get stacked together, the noise disappears and it leaves you with a really clean night photograph. This was on the cover of PSA Journal last January. You might have seen it there. Again, this is another shot of the exterior of the Alicia Alonso Grand Ballroom. This was in Tuscany. I mentioned that you can hand hold the night mode camera for up to 10 seconds. The gyroscope in the camera won't let you shoot for longer than that. But if you put it on a tripod at night, like I did here in Italy, this went to 30 seconds. And in that 30 seconds, I mean, it got the detail in the cypress trees here, a beautiful sky, and I even have a shooting star over here. And that was about a 30-second exposure. This one was in the Palouse. I went to a friend's farm, and what we're looking at there is the Milky Way on a cloudy night. We had clouds that kind of interfered, but I still liked the shot. And again, it did a nice job of getting the sky. And then for the light on the truck, I took a bright flashlight and for 2 seconds just went over the truck with the light. And that was enough to give it that spotlight on the truck. I mentioned that I've been doing infrared with the phone, and these are some of the photographs that I've done with that. There's some that are more dramatic than others. This one I took just before I left for Cape Cod last spring, or last fall. And I mean, that's pretty amazing when you look, that blue sky turned black, the clouds are amazing. It's just remarkable to me that you can do this with the phone. Now, this was with another camera app called Camera Plus Pro Camera and Editor, not the native camera, but the native camera does a great job of doing infrared. This was a native camera photo. This is the at Magnolia Plantation Gardens. And again, this is another photo. I'd be happy if I'd made this with my Fuji. This was made just this spring, last spring, with the 15 Pro Max of this grain elevator in the Palouse. That's a blue sky, turns black. All the grass around it is green, but it turns white and infrared. So the rest of these I'm going to let you look at. If you're interested in infrared, you can find a link to a blog post. We'll talk a little bit about RAW when we get in here. We now have the capability of photographing in RAW on our phones. It's been around for a while, but it's gotten better and better. We have the Pro RAW flavor, which is Apple's flavor of RAW, but you can also use other apps that let you get different varieties of RAW files if you want. The point is, you've got more data to work with. You can make more creative decisions when you're processing, and there's really no reason not to do it now. So if you haven't tried it, I encourage you to give that a shot. You can look at this. I created a little before you shoot checklist, and you can run through that on your own. Just some things that go through my mind as I think about, before I click the shutter, about what I want my camera to be set up at. And again, in the interest of time, we don't need to go through all those things. The other thing that I have in here that you'll have, whether you have a 10 or a 16, the settings that you choose are going to help you do the things you want to do. And so what I've done, I've had all these phones over the years, and I've gone in and I've made screenshots of the setting panels from everything from the 10S all the way to the 16. So you can go in here and on your own time and look at those, look up your phone and choose the settings that will get you the results that you're looking for. We're going to look at some of that in a minute in the camera, but I'm not going to go through all of those details. These are some accessories. People ask me all the time, what do I use for tripods and things like that. A couple of pocket tripods, believe it or not, I use these all the time. Some other things. I did want to mention Photo AI. I don't know if you may be familiar with Topaz Labs products. Photo AI is software that runs on the desktop, not on the iPhone yet. I understand they're about to release an app for the iPhone called Gigapixel AI on the 22nd of January. But what I mentioned this for is that if you crop in on a photo, or if you have a smaller iPhone photo, Topaz Photo AI uses machine learning and artificial intelligence to correct reducing noise, sharpening, and it will increase the resolution of your files. It's truly magical software. I use it almost every day on my iPhone images and my big camera images. And just full disclosure, I've been a rep for them for 7 or 8 years. And if you click this link and make a purchase, I earn a small commission. So if you do that, I thank you. But I do think it's an important tool. Like I said, I use it every day. The rest of these things, there's my article on the PSA. You can look at that. I just had an article published there in October on my trip to Calabria last year that describes the experience that I had in that trip. And then there's some videos that you might check out on my Thinkific site. And I mentioned before, if you get any videos from there, there's a discount code for your club to access to get a discount on those. So that's my run through those slides, which went very quickly, I know. What I'm going to do now is move my camera over here to my desktop. And I'm just going to open up here. I've got a really humble little setup here that's going to allow me to demonstrate some of these things. What I'm looking at here, let me go back. I'm looking at the native camera. This is the camera that comes with your iPhone, this one right here. I'll tap and open it up. Excuse me. And what I want to do is walk around the interface. And I know this will be a review for some of you, but I really do hope that I'm able to introduce you to some things that maybe you didn't know about or that you'll want to try. So the first thing you'll notice up in the upper left is a flash icon. And I generally turn that off. The flash is a one bright blast. You can't turn it down, and it's right on the camera, which is, so when you're pointing at a subject, that's never a good angle, or rarely a good angle. It's certainly not a flattering angle to get a portrait. So I don't use it. I turn it off. The next thing that you see here is an exposure dial, exposure compensation dial. Notice I have mine set on 0. I generally leave it there unless I'm in a really dark situation or a really light situation. If you tap on that, it's a button. So when I tap on it, it brings up this dial, the exposure dial down here. I can darken or brighten the scene by 2 stops. So if I wanted to brighten things, I would go to the right, 2 stops, and you can see I've brightened the scene considerably. Or I can go back to 0 and I can darken the scene down to -2. So I usually leave this on 0 unless, like I said, I have extreme lighting situations, because there are other ways to set exposure and focus. One of those ways, if you don't tell the camera where to focus and where to get a light reading, it will choose something. So if you want it to focus in a particular place, like let's say I want to focus on my little frog here, I'm going to tap on the screen and I get this little box around the screen. And there's also like a little sun icon here. It's pretty faint. But if you take your finger on the screen and slide up, you can brighten your scene. Or if you slide down, you can darken your scene. So it's a great way to manage your exposure compensation right from the dial, or right from the screen itself. If you want to lock your exposure and your focus, you're just simply going to hold your finger on the screen. See how it jiggles? And now I've locked my focus and exposure right here on the frog. Now these lenses are very wide, all of them, so many things are going to be in focus anyway, even if they're distant. But you can see, if you look at the background here, that's a little softer than what I'm seeing on the frog when I tap to focus there. So you can get a little bit of depth of field just by focusing with a tap. So those are 2 ways to set your exposure. I'm going to tap this little plus minus and put that slider away. And the next thing that you might see, depending on if you're in a very dark spot right now, I'm in a relatively dark room. So what I'm going to do Watch what happens. I'm going to turn off one of my lights here. Let's see. Let's turn this one off. Notice as soon as I turned off the light, look what happened. I am in a low enough light situation now that my night mode kicked in. And what night mode is telling me is that, hey, it's dark enough in here that I'm going to photograph for 1 second and take a bunch of photos and stack them all together behind the scenes. You don't know that it's happening. So what I'm going to do here, just to give you an idea, I'm going to switch. I'm on 1x right now, but I'm going to switch to 2x and zoom in on this little fountain in the background here. And I can tap on that, and I can drop my exposure a little for a little drama in that humble scene. And what I'm going to do is I'll tap my shutter now, and notice it's telling me it's a 1 second exposure. Now, before we go any further, if you're on a dark night, you're out walking around and you want to take a picture of the street lights at night or whatever, and you hold your camera up and this doesn't come on, it means that it probably got turned off in the menu. So what you're going to do is tap on this little icon here. Normally you see your camera choices down here, but if you tap on this icon, it opens up a new menu down below. There's our flash icon that I looked at before, and here is the night mode icon. If I tap on that, notice right now mine is set to maximum 1 second, but you can dial it back to auto. And as soon as I dialed it back to auto, it's still on, but it's not active. It's not dark enough for auto. And I can also turn it all the way down so it's completely off. So you have the option of turning it off, but if you're out and you want it on and it doesn't automatically come on, you're going to open it up and come down here and slide it all the way over to maximum. And it's fluctuating a little bit. Look, it's telling me 9 seconds right now, but let's just see if I reset, it's going to reset there. But if I turn my lights down even more, just kind of adjusting my light here, now it's going to tell me it's dark enough in here for a 5 second exposure. I'm going to tap the shutter button, and this is what it does. Now I have mine sitting on a tripod, but I could be hand holding this for up to 10 seconds, but it's easier for me to set it on the tripod for this. It does this, it tells me to hold still, and then when I look at it, here's my image. And let's zoom in on this. And again, I don't know if you can see that. There is very little noise in this photograph, and I'm almost in the dark. That is a very, very low light on that little fountain. So it really does a pretty amazing job, but sometimes you have to turn it on. That's what I was pointing out there. As we move across the menu here, up at the top, you notice I have my camera set to shoot RAW. I like to shoot RAW. I usually shoot the RAW Max. If I tap on that, it turns it on. When the line is through it, it's off. If you don't see that, if you have a 12 or later, I think that's when it was, the 12, if you're not seeing that, it means you haven't turned on that RAW format in your camera settings. And we're going to look at that in a second when we go out to camera settings. So you have some options with the 15 and 16 where you can shoot several different varieties of RAW. And there's one I want to tell you about that I think it's quite remarkable, has much of the data that the full RAW file has, but it's a smaller file size and doesn't take up as much space on our camera roll, which can be an issue for some people. The other thing that I'm going to show you, one other thing that has to be set in settings, and then we're going to go out and look at that. So I'm going to turn my lights back on here, brighten things up again. And notice when I do that, it's bright enough now that night mode turned itself off. It's bright enough now that it doesn't need that. So what I wanted to show you here is how macro control works. And this is another thing that you have to turn it on in your camera settings or you won't see what I'm about to show you. When you have something in your frame and you move it close to the screen, did you see that? Let me do it again. let's see here. As I move this closer, do you see that little flash? And when it flashed, now I have a little flower icon in the lower left of the screen. That is telling me that macro control has turned on. And what's significant about this is that macro control, even if you're set like I am right now to 2x, when I move close enough to the screen, that macro is going to kick in. When it switches to macro, it's automatically going to the 13 mm camera. This is really crazy because it's telling me I'm on the 45 mm camera right here. But when I take this photo, watch, I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to tap the shutter, take the photo. And now when I go look at the photo, I'm in the camera roll. And if I swipe up, I can see the metadata. And look, it's telling me it was made with a 13 mm. The only camera that will make a macro photo is the 13 mm. So you really want to know when it switches. If you don't have macro control turned on in your camera roll, you won't see that switch. So what I want to show you now, we're going to go into the settings, and I'm going to show you where to turn on RAW and also where to turn on macro control. So what I'm going to do is go out to the camera settings, or the phone settings actually, and in the phone setting list, if you scroll down, you'll see camera right here. I'm going to tap on camera, and if I scroll all the way to the bottom, there is macro control. I recommend that you turn that on. It doesn't mean that you're always going to take macro photos. It means that you're going to have the switch on your camera that allows you to turn macro control on and off. So having it on there just opens up your options. So I encourage you to turn that on. The other thing that I was mentioning is turning on Pro RAW. First of all, if you scroll down just a short ways, you'll see formats. And if I tap on formats, now this is the 16 Pro, so it's going to be different even from the 15 and the 14 and the 13. On the earlier phones, you can go look at those slides that I sent you, that I'll send you, that have the recommended settings for those earlier phones. For the 16, what you'll want to do is come down and you want to make sure that you turn on Pro Default. I'm sorry, you want to make sure that you turn on Pro RAW Resolution. If I turn that off, notice that other option went away. Well, I'm going to tap to turn it on, and now I can go and set my Pro Default. When I tap on that into the next level, I have several options here. I can choose, I can choose 48 megapixel RAW, which is what I recommend. But I also, in conjunction with that, is to choose JPEG Lossy XL. And what happened, this is a format, it's still a lossy format, but it is a remarkable format, and it still preserves much of the data in the file and allows you almost the same capability to edit that data or have that data in it as a full resolution 48 megapixel file. And if you look down here, you can see the differences there. So this is the setup that I recommend. The other thing that I'd recommend here is on this panel, when you have the option to choose between high efficiency and most compatible, this is a JPEG file. Nothing wrong with it, but it's old technology. It's a large file consuming a lot of space, and it doesn't have nearly the data. And this is, I believe, an 11-bit file, which is another technicality that can make a difference. But I encourage you to set things to high efficiency. What this means is when you turn off RAW and decide you don't want to make a RAW photo, it's going to default to high efficiency. It's a very good alternative. And again, it's a smaller file size than the Pro Raw Max file. So those are a couple of the things that I recommend here for settings in order to get those options. Now, the other thing you'll notice right now, as you see, I've got this turned off. This is actually also a button where I'm pointing here. If I tap on that, hold my finger on it for a second, I get a whole menu of stuff. I don't have to go back to the settings. I can choose HEIF Max or RAW 12 or RAW Max right here in this tray. So I'm going to go back and I'll select RAW Max. So you have some control to choose what you shoot with. If space is a concern for you, and you don't have a large hard drive on your phone, you may want to be judicious about your use of RAW files. I have a terabyte of space on my phone. I keep things in the iCloud. Space is not an issue, so I shoot in the large RAW files. But they do give you some really great creative options for processing. If you print, I highly recommend using that Pro Raw. The next thing I wanted to go to here, excuse me, is live mode. And I'm going to guess most of you have seen this or used it. When it first came out, it drove me crazy. I'd take a picture and then I'd go look in the camera roll and it would move at me. And I didn't understand what was happening with it. Well, I understand it now. If I tap on this, it flashes live for a second, tells me it's in live mode. What live mode does is takes a 4-second video. It's only 4 seconds. But it takes this 4-second video and then it produces an image. Anything moving will show that soft waterfall or whatever. Anything that's not moving will look tack sharp. So just by way of example here, if I come in here, I'll switch to 2x for this example. I've got my little fountain here. I'll tap, I'll darken my scene a little bit so we can kind of see that. And I've got RAW active. I wish they left the word up here so you could see it was on, but it's on if there's no line through it. Notice also when I turned on live mode, RAW turned off. You cannot get a RAW file in live mode. So I'm going to go ahead and take this photograph and watch what happens. Flashes live on the screen and it's done. Now I'm going to come in and open the image. There it is. And notice it tells me it's a live photo. If I tap on that, I have several options. One of them is long exposure. So if I tap on long exposure, watch what happens. It's rendering. And there it is. And look what it's done. It's softened that water. Everything else is tack sharp, but the water is soft. So let's go take a look at just some of the examples that are possible with this tool. And again, I'm just going to briefly share some of these to give you the idea. But this was a spillway that I encountered in Italy, and this is what it looked like right out of the camera. But then I went in and chose live mode here, tapped on live, and I chose long exposure. And now it turns it into that. That's no tripod, no neutral density filter. Here's another one of, this is a scene in Cape Cod, this pier. That's the shot right out of the camera. Switch it to long exposure, and you get this ethereal looking situation. I've got several examples here. We don't need to look at all of them, but this is that one that I showed you of the Palouse Falls. And again, if I go back to live mode, that's what came out of the camera. And then I switched to long exposure. And this one's not been processed at all. But you see what it's done to the waterfall. I mean, it's just a really gorgeous thing. You can also do it with things like this is a Ferris or a wheel at the fair. If you look at the live mode, it looks like that. But then when you look at the long exposure, you get the movement of the ride. It's just a really fun tool. Again, no neutral density filter, no tripod, 4-second video, and you can make some really fine images using that that feature. I'll go ahead and leave RAW off. I did want to mention a couple other things about these options that we have for lenses. These are the optical choices that we have for our lens choices. This is a 13, a 24, I think this is 70, 72, and this is 120. When you're out taking a photo, it's very tempting to take two fingers and zoom in on your subject. Well, you can do that, but just know that when you do that, you're switching from an optical zoom that's using the lenses and the glass in the camera to a digital zoom. And it's going to reduce the resolution of your image, and the quality of it is going to drop pretty dramatically. So my advice is to try and always use one of the lenses that you have here. If you can't make a photo in any other way, go ahead and zoom in. You can actually zoom out to 666 millimeters with this phone. Now, it's not going to be the highest quality photo, but you can do a lot with it, especially if you use desktop software like Photo AI to recover the image, and you'll be surprised at what you can do. So that's my tip. Try and use these lenses, or zoom with your feet. If you can, walk closer, and rather than try and pinch and zoom. Couple other things I wanted to share with you here. If you are ever shooting sports, or maybe you're playing with your grandkids, or you're throwing frisbee with your dog, and you want to get one of those shots where you get the volleyball player spiking the ball at the top of the net, it's very hard to time that shot. So what you do is do a burst of photos, and then that burst of photos will have the one in it that is the money shot, if you will. So to do that, it's simple to do. I'll just use my little a little frog here, and what you do for this is you're going to take the shutter button and just drag it to the left and hold on to it. As long as you hold it, it's going to keep shooting. So here we go. I'm going to drag the shutter. I didn't do a good job of focusing, but I just took, in that time, I just took 67 bursts. So what's happening is if I tap on this button right here that tells me I took 67 photos, I'm going to tap on that, and down here are all the photos. So it's like looking at a flip book that we had as kids. Each of these is a separate image. And again, I didn't focus very well, but I can come in here and say, well, that's the money shot. That's the one I want. That's the volleyball player spiking the ball or dunking the ball, or the dog catching the frisbee. So it's a great way of capturing a moment that is very difficult to capture. One other little thing that I'll share with you here that is really fun. We know we can take videos with this camera. You can go down here and turn on video mode, but there's another way to launch the video. And this way allows you to take a still at the same time you're making a video. I do this when I'm photographing dancers in Cuba. When they go to do a leap or something, I will do this video so I get their whole range of motion, but then I'll take stills while they're moving or dancing. So here's what happens. Again, I'll use my little frog and see if I can focus a little better. This time I'm going to drag the shutter button to the right. So watch, here we go. And I'm going to release it. And notice up at the top, you see the numbers in the red box. That tells me the video camera is running. But let's say I want to get a photograph while the video is being made. Well, I'm going to tap the shutter button on the right. Just made a photo. Just made another photo, and another, and another. When I'm done, I'm going to tap the red button. I've stopped the video. And now when I go out to the camera roll, here is my video, 23-second video. Not very exciting video, but
release it.
There it is.
And notice up at the top.
And here are the stills that I made while the video was running. So you got the best of both worlds. You get to do two things at the same time. I find it really useful, and it's one of those things that kind of, it's, unless you know about it, it's not real well known.
Hey, Rad,
Yeah,
sorry to interrupt you.
yeah.
You were demonstrating something, but we couldn't see anything. I don't know if it was your sleeve blocking or something. I wonder if you could, I'm not sure what,
Oh,
but there's nothing visible.
do you see my screen now?
No.
Really? Okay. So
I
you
see your,
you don't,
Brad, or Rad, I see your screen.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I saw it
So I've
too.
got some, so I saw you. Am I the only one that didn't see the screen?
I think you might be, Steve.
Saw the screen.
The whole
yeah,
time.
sometimes I lose the connection, but it's showing me that I'm connected right now.
Okay.
I'm seeing.
Sorry. Yeah,
There-
I see. I was on the wrong, my fault. I was on
Okay,
the wrong
okay.
panel.
No, I
I
appreciate you bringing that
apologize.
up. I
I
hate to
apologize.
have that happen and not get it right. So, um, um, okay, so we looked at burst mode, we looked at video. The next thing that I want to talk about here is the portrait mode. And I'm just going to, again, I'll use my little frog here, and I'm going to switch to portrait mode down here. And again, depending on which phone you have, you're going to have it if you have anything past the 7 Plus, but it may have a few different features than what you may have. So notice what I'm doing right now. I'm going to move this out of the way, and there's our frog. I'm on the 2X. If I tap 2X here, I can choose any of these lenses that are available to me. I'm going to just stick with the 2X for this demo. And I'm going to tap for focus on the frog, but notice it's telling me to move further away. And natural light, which is the light mode here, is grayed out. What this tells me is that portrait mode isn't active. I could make this photo, but it's not going to make a depth map. So I'm not going to get a true portrait photo that I can blur and so on. What it wants me to do is move further away. So I'm going to move my phone back. And when I get to a certain distance, there. See that? When I got right to the certain distance, natural light, pardon me, natural light activated, telling me portrait mode is working now. So portrait mode lets you do two things here. Up here, you have a simulated f-stop. There's no aperture on the iPhone, so this is fake. It's simulated. If I tap on that f16, it's going to bring up a dial down here. And imagine an aperture on a big camera. f16 is going to be a very small aperture, and it's going to have a longer depth of field. As I open up and slide down, that aperture is going to open up. And now look at the background. Now that I'm down to 4.0 or 3.5, I've got this beautiful bokeh behind the subject, but the subject is still sharp. You can do all of this at this point, but you don't have to. Let me show you what I mean. So the other thing you can adjust is light. So you can choose by scrolling through these options. There's that stage light option that the photo I showed you earlier with the black background. And then there's stage light mono. You can choose any of these, and you can choose them before you make the photo if you want, but you don't have to. And here's what I recommend. When you take a portrait photo, don't worry about anything in terms of your settings except getting this active. Make sure that you are at the right distance from your subject so that it's not telling you to move closer or move further, and you see this yellow activated. Then take your photo and watch. I'm going to go ahead. I'll go ahead and do that. I'll take my photo. Now, when I look at the photo in the camera roll, it tells me it's a portrait. And if I tap on portrait, I could turn it off if I wanted to. I'm going to leave it on. But if I come down to the editor down here, this is the camera roll editor. It used to say edit, and they changed it with the iOS 18. When I tap on that now, notice it opens me in the portrait editor. And so now I can edit my photo. I didn't have to worry about those settings before. All I had to do was make sure portrait mode was activated. So here I can start by dropping my f-stop. And look, if I could take it all the way down to 1.4 and look at how blurred everything is, but also I got a little greedy with wanting that blur, and look, I've lost a little bit of my edge. I think that can be too far, but if I come back to about 4.5 or so, now I've still got a clean edge on my subject. It's sharp, and my background is got that beautiful bokeh. The next thing I can do is choose my light. And I'm going to come up here and tap on the light icon. And down below, I now have these light modes, and I'm just going to drag on them. There's studio light, or I'm sorry, natural light, studio light. See how it brightens the subject. There is contour light, and there is stage light. I mean, that's pretty cool. You've got a spotlight on your subject. Now, once you choose any of these light modes, let's go back to studio light, you've got a dial down here, and you can darken or brighten that particular light mode. So you've got some control there. And you can do that on any of them. If you go to the stage light, you can also do that here where you can dial it down or brighten it up. But the other thing you can do, once you've chosen stage light, you can go back to the f-stop. And if you manipulate the f-stop, you can see how if I go up to turning that all the way to off, now I've got a little bit of background there, but as I go down, I can go way down, and I'm narrowing the spotlight. So you've got some control with doing that too. So the takeaway from this is it's very cool to do. And you can get some amazing portraits, but you don't have to do all of your settings before you take the photograph. The only thing you really have to do when you're taking the photograph, if I go back to the camera again, the only thing I have to do is make sure that I'm the right distance. See, right now it's not active, but if I just move a little bit and get the right distance from my subject, now it's active. That's really all you need to do in order to get a really good portrait. Then you can do your final editing afterwards. So I'm aware that it's at 8 o'clock. So I'm at my hour. I hope that wasn't too fast for everyone. I know I kind of went through things pretty quickly. I'm happy to take questions for as long as you like.
Yeah. Thank you, Rad, for a very informative presentation. I just wanted to share one observation that the smartphones have done for photography, and it's made it much easier to do photography wherever you want to. Before, museums would say you can't take pictures. Now, since everybody has a phone, they realize they can't stop that.
Yeah.
So now they just say don't use a flash. I've been to concerts where they say you can't bring in a camera with a fixed lens or a lens that are interchangeable, but they can't stop you from taking videos with iPhones and stuff like that. So that's just my observation.
No, that's absolutely
the question
true.
I have. Yeah. The question I have, and since I get to go first here, is do you have, if you're buying a new phone, do you have to have the Pro version versus the regular version to get the things that you talked about this evening?
It's a really good question, Bruce. With the 16, you need the Pro. The Pro and the Pro Max are virtually identical except for the size of the camera. I mean, the size of the device. The Pro is a little smaller, but the technical specs are almost identical. With the other phones, the Pro and the Pro Max, like on the 15, they're different. The Max has some features that the Pro doesn't have. That's a really important distinction. And if you get away from the Pro and just get the 15, I don't even know what they call it, those are really not photographers' cameras. They don't have a lot of the bells and whistles that photographers want. It's really been a challenge because people go out and they're price conscious. So they buy the 15 plus or whatever they call it instead of the Pro or the Pro Max, and they're getting a camera phone that isn't nearly the quality that they would get if they went to Pro. So with the 16, you're good on either one. On the earlier models, you want to look at, I would say, look them up and look for a comparison so you see what you're sacrificing if you don't get the Pro or if you get something less than the Pro.
Thank you. Any other questions, folks?
Yes, read that people are making comments about how helpful it was and you did a great job. And
Oh,
then
thank you.
Scott Klein, the teacher that's on, said absolutely amazing. It's going to revolutionize his class.
Oh, well, good, Scott. I'm glad to hear it.
I'd like to know, how did you get 1 terabyte of space on your camera?
Well, the 16 and the 15, maybe even the 14, you can get 250, 500 or 500 gigabyte or 1 terabyte.
Oh,
And so
okay.
when I purchased it, I bought the terabyte. You know, I've never been disappointed in buying as much hard drive space as I can get over the years. So that's what I do. But we also have the iCloud, which is a great way to store photos. If you use Lightroom, there's the Adobe Creative Cloud space there, which I also use that. So there are lots of options for storing our photos that don't necessarily have to take up our hard drive space.
Oh, I have a question, if I could.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gene, were you continuing with
I
other
was
questions?
just going to say, if anyone else wanted to ask questions, to unmute themselves.
Thank you. So as a photographer, I'm used to using Lightroom.
Yeah.
Do you have a best practice recommendation for importing phone photographs into my desktop computer to use Lightroom?
And I assume you mean Lightroom Classic.
Classic, yes, sir.
You know, I can't tell you, I can't describe it to you in a word. It's convoluted. I have it set up. I don't use it very often because there are some other options available. Now, Lightroom Classic, in my opinion, this is just my opinion. I know it's been the standard for years and years and years. I think it's going to phase out because there is also a desktop version of Lightroom that is part of that classic Creative Cloud option, and it has almost all of the features of Classic and none of the headaches of the catalogs issues that people have. There is a way to do it. I'm trying to think. I just did a webinar with my good friend Jack Davis, and Jack is much more knowledgeable about Lightroom than I am. He's been using Photoshop since before it was called Photoshop, and Lightroom, and he could probably explain how to do that. You have to create a collection in your catalog, and you can drop your images into that collection, and then you sync them with your. But it can get convoluted, so I'm not well enough versed to tell you how to do it. I know it can be done.
Okay.
I can tell you this though, do you use Lightroom Mobile on your phone?
No.
Well, I would encourage you to. You're paying for it already. If you've got Lightroom and Photoshop on your desktop, you're paying for the app. It's part of the subscription. So don't get it off the App Store. Go to the iCloud page where they have that stuff and download it from there for your phone. Install it from there. And then you can actually go into Lightroom and you can access all your photos right from the Lightroom mobile app. It's not your catalog though. That's a different thing. And I understand what you're asking. But I don't have a good answer for you.
No problem. I appreciate all the great information you've provided this evening. I was just curious about that tidbit that I've struggled with. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm going to just say one other thing. We just did a 3-hour webinar with Jack and I, and we went into a lot of the details about the integration of Lightroom stuff. And I'm not trying to sell you on something, but it is 3 hours of tremendous information. And it looks not only at the iPhone app, but it looks at the integration. That question is touched on. And you may be familiar enough with that you can follow those instructions and do it. Not everyone can, because it's convoluted. As you know, Lightroom can be, it's sensitive in terms of how you do things. But there'll be a link to that webinar. It's called Lightroom Mobile. We talk about the things that are new, and a lot of new features came out at the end of the year. And I think you'd find it really valuable.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Pat, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have the 13 Pro and I'm on the verge of getting a new iPhone.
Uh-huh.
So, which one should I get? Or
Well,
can I stick with the 13 Pro?
You know, the 13 Pro is a great camera. You can, I'm thinking about this. The 13 Pro will give you, I don't think you can get the 48 megapixel files,
No, I don't think so.
but you can shoot RAW.
Right.
It's a very good phone. It depends on what you want to do. I always tell people to get the phone the most current phone that their budget will allow. The 16 is truly amazing, and you will find a big difference between the 13 and the 16.
Okay.
You're going to get 48 megapixel files from your 13 millimeter ultra wide lens, as well as your 1x 24 millimeter. You're going to have all these different options for file format that will allow you to take really great, create great files with lots of data, but not take up a lot of space. So there are a lot of advantages to the 16.
Okay.
I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but
Yeah. Well,
life's short. Life's short. Get the latest one.
Well, I hadn't thought about getting a new one, but there are some aspects of the 13 that, and it has nothing to do with the camera. It's the other features of the phone or the bugs in the phone that are bothering me.
Oh,
So I may want to get a new phone.
well, and I don't know what those are, and you may encounter the same kinds of bugs in a new phone too. I mean, none of them are perfect, and they, once you learn something, they change it. So then you have to learn it over again. So
Oh, that brings me to a related question. How long before there will be a replacement for the 16 Pro?
well, Apple has introduced a new phone every September, October for the last 15 years. They should do that again this year. There are rumors that they're going to go to every 2 years. I don't know. There are lots of rumors about what's coming in the one in this fall, that it'll be able to get 48 megapixels on all the cameras. There's a lot of technology advancements happening right now with machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I'm not talking about the AI where you say, give me a picture of a cat playing a violin on the moon. I'm talking about AI that does things like clarify our images, increases resolution, remove unwanted objects, things like that can really benefit a photographer. Those are going to be built in more and more in the future phone. So, I mean, it's a toss-up. The 13 is a great camera. Depending on what you're doing with it, you may want to hold out until the 17
Okay.
and invest in the 17. I mean, the 13 is a great phone.
I bought it because I read a lot of reviews before I bought it, and I think then it was the 14 was the latest out,
Mhm.
and a lot of reviews said that if you're a photographer, the 13 Pro was better, so that's why I got it.
Well, it had some things. It had a 2x lens, I think it was, or 3x that we don't have on the later phones, and a lot of photographers liked that. It was really nice for portraits. It's not available on the current phone. So there were some features that people fell in love with, and then they changed it. That may be what you saw.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody have any other questions this evening for Rad?
Red, could you just take maybe one more minute and talk about some of your favorite apps that we should consider, like, I don't know, whichever ones that
Well,
you like the most.
yeah. So I mentioned Lightroom Mobile. I think it is the best raw editor we have for our mobile devices today. It's almost as good as Lightroom Classic on the desktop. Fabulous tool. And if you're already subscribed to the Creative Cloud, you're already paying for it. So put it on your phone and use it. The other app is Snapseed. Snapseed was designed by the engineers that created Nix software. Many of you use Nix software on your desktop. It's fabulous software. Google bought the iPhone app from Nick years ago, and it's free, but it is a powerful, powerful tool. And so I would highly recommend that. Now, it's not a camera. It has a camera in it, but it's not made to take pictures. It's made to edit and stylize photographs. So it's great for doing that kind of work. There are also apps. There's a group of apps by a company called JixiePix, Jixipix, and they make something called dramatic black and white. If you love black and white photography like I do, this is a really fun app that lets you almost sculpt the light in your image. It's relatively simple to use. I've got a video on it on my YouTube channel, and on my Thinkific channel, and you might find some free videos on my YouTube channel too. But it's wonderful. If you like to blend photographs together or create composites, there's an old app called Image Blender, and it allows you to take two photographs and combine them, and it's got maybe 20 different blend modes that you can select from as you're blending images. It has a masking component. It's a very cool tool for creating composites. Those are a handful.
Yeah, great.
Well, Rad, thank you. I've got one final question
Okay.
before we say goodnight. Does your frog have a name?
You know, I'm Jeremiah, maybe. I don't know. I've never thought of naming it, but I was a musician for a while. I was a percussionist, and this is it's actually a percussion instrument. So you like that.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway,
just wondering after we've been staring at it here for so long, it was the main attraction here. Thanks again for the very informative presentation tonight. I think I've given us a lot to think about. Also, we've got lots of snow here in the Cuyahoga Valley right now. If you're ever this way, come see us.
I would love to get up that way. I haven't been up there since I won the local soapbox derby in 1967, and I was in
Oh
Akron.
my gosh.
Can you believe it? Yeah, I know. But no, it's part of the
Well, it's
country I
changed
love.
since 1960. It's changed since 1967. We do have the only national park in Ohio up here. So
I'm sure it's beautiful. I've looked at pictures online. I was looking at
It
your
is
site earlier.
beautiful. It is
Yeah.
definitely beautiful.
and for the rest of you, we hope to see you in the valley soon. We got the photo walk this weekend, and again, thanks for Rad, and we'll look forward to sharing your slide deck with the people who weren't able to make it this evening.
Well,
So,
great. I'll get that out to you. Gene, I'll send that to you either tonight or tomorrow.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rad.
Thanks for
Thank you,
having me,
Rad.
everyone.
Thank
Happy
you
New
all.
Year.